As Secret Invasion rolls on, we've had a more optimistic, for the reader, situation than we had with Age of Ultron. There had been build-up, and the first issue paid off on that build-up. And the first month tie-ins then provided additional build-up, new fronts, if you will, in the war that was coming. So let's hop into Secret Invasion number 2. It admittedly has a great double spread to open it. On one side are the heroes who flew down here and have been bickering. On the other side, a collection of characters that includes a lot of them that are either dead, out of the game, or wearing very dated costumes. As a lot of people put it, it's the 1970s Marvel Universe. Yet the interesting aspect is, knowing that these have to be Skrulls, is how this contrast plays up the fractured nature of the heroes of the current era. Captain America is leading a coalition of characters who have rallied together under him in the face of a clear threat, like you would expect from the classic era. The real deal, however, is divided, bickering, and only united in that they will probably attack the new arrivals before their ex-comrades. Probably. But what truly shows how the world's been turned upside down is that the voice of reason is Ares. Yes, as in the god of war. Not a guy named after the god of war, the actual god of war, who is telling everybody not to escalate things. That's how bad it's gotten. The avatar of war is the voice of reason. He tells them all that this is a trap, a distraction. If they get into it now, they're playing into the Skrulls' hands. So they decide to play into the Skrulls' hands. During this, the Sentry has his head messed with by the Vision. I'll get into that later. But suffice to say, without him, their biggest advantage vanishes. But that doesn't mean that it's over. Just that this isn't an easy mop-up. And the sides get into a huge fight until suddenly, dinosaur. This causes them to scatter, naturally, so it's even harder to tell who is on whose side, and soon Wolverine has Mockingbird dead to rights. But Ronin, that's Hawkeye at this point in time, asks her something that only his late wife would know, and when she answers it, he tells the others that she is not a Skrull, and they decide not to press the issue. Besides, there's the real action up in New York, where the Baxter building has gotten sucked into the negative zone, and a Skrull ship has arrived. Enjoy the worst padding decision I have seen this event, as we have a panel, and then to show this is serious, the exact same panel, completely unaltered, but slightly zoomed in. This is not an editing decision. This is somebody who realized, I have not filled up this page yet. But the big final reveal is of Skrulls landing, and they have their own army of superpowered Skrulls, presumably about to kick some ass. This is a solid 1-2 punch for the story. First, the matchup with the doppelgangers, and then the revelation that those are really just the B team. Varsity has arrived with a clear set of powers that are going to be a lot harder and will face a city largely undefended. The small character moment with Ronin is a nice break and opens the door to questions of whether or not the Skrulls made the sick decision to include some of their actual friends in order to make them second-guess killing the duplicates. I again got the sense that I had a complete issue as well, and remain cautiously optimistic for the third issue. I say cautiously because for a Secret Invasion, this sure seems rather overt, and I'm wondering if this is going to have an acceptable payoff, but I haven't felt jaded like I did by this point in Age of Ultron. This brings us to Mighty Avengers number 13. In the last issue, we saw Nick Fury getting pulled into this fiasco when Skrulls tried to pump him for information and assassinate him, so we got Spider-Woman back into it, unaware that New Avengers told us that Spider-Woman was actually a Skrull. So Nick meets up with Quake, aka Daisy Johnson, the one who is the focal point of a lot of the Marvel Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. TV series episodes. Of course, this is years before all of that. In fact, about the time that the MCU was first getting off the ground, so it's particularly amusing that Nick Fury has disguised himself as the one from the Ultimate Universe, and the one that will eventually be played by Samuel L. Jackson in the MCU. And looking at him, Quake tells him his disguise is ridiculous. But anyway, Fury has approached her because he has a list of what they call caterpillars, and not because they sit on mushrooms sucking on a hookah. They're the offspring of known metas who thus have powers, but nobody knows that yet. They haven't emerged, if you will. Fury reasons that they're the only ones the two can rely upon. The Skrulls wouldn't have copied them any more than they would have any other random young person out there. No one is going to go undercover as the cliquey bitch 17-year-old at Columbus, Ohio High School. So she approaches a variety of people, we'll get to that later on too, and assembles a team for Fury to train in secret. This continues the rather surprising decision to sideline the Avengers from their own book and make it a Nick Fury one. It's just with some of the things that we've been getting into, it's surprising that they wouldn't have given this its own limited series, suggesting one of two possibilities. Either this is tying into the longer events of the Avengers, or there was nothing else that could be fit into the Avengers at this particular moment without making things awkward or complicated, or probably both. The choice of artist does help to fit the tone of this book quite well, using a sketchy sort of quality that fits in with the shadowy thing that this book has become. It'll change for the next issue to fit with that tone as well, suggesting that this was a deliberate artistic choice. If I seem like I've glossed over this, it's not because I don't appreciate it. The brief inclusion of Layla Miller from X Factor was an inspired moment. It's just a lot of the introductions of new characters is all, well, not terribly important just yet. And we've got a lot more issues to cover than usual this time. Next up is the unexpected Captain Britain and MI-13 #1. I have no idea what this could be about, so I'm prepared for everything. So I open up and find out that a Skrull that looks like John Lennon has been secretly working for the British intelligence for years with full knowledge that he is a Skrull. Okay, I apparently was not prepared for everything. The minister in charge wants John the Skrull killed since the Skrulls have invaded, but it seems that this was all a setup to test whether or not the minister himself was a Skrull, and it turns out he was. And Pete Wisdom, a mutant, slices the guy to pieces. And just in time for the open invasion to take place. It seems that there is another invasion force of Skrulls that have showed up in the UK, and we eventually discover the reason for this is that the British heroes tend to derive their power from magic rather than from any kind of super science. And so the Skrulls want control of their magic. Well, you might find this hard to believe, but when an army of alien super soldiers shows up, there turn out to be some casualties. So, someone named Faja is helping to treat the wounded. The Black Knight has been a long-time character in the Marvel Universe. He's a big guy with a sword, and is clearly mental. But you take what help you can during an alien invasion. Well, we see that the Prime Minister is indeed the then-current Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, which might make some people wonder if perhaps there was some help during an alien invasion we could do without. His brownness tells Captain Britain and the others to go protect the entrance to Avalon to ensure that the magic for Britain is safe, but also to ensure the safety of the world so that the Skrulls don't get their dirty hands on it. This involves bashing their way through their defenses, which includes a very eye-catching shot of Captain Britain punching a Skrull so hard its head flies off. Not a little background either. Take a good, solid look at that. Then, in answer to those mystical voices that have been speaking throughout the issue, Captain Britain flies in to save the entrance, but appears to get pulverized in the process. The end? This, I have to say, is a lot to suddenly take on board. Leaving aside the fact that it's a tie-in, this book throws a lot of stuff and seems to assume a level of knowledge from the reader that I do not possess. The thing that was particularly slippery was stuff around Pete Wisdom, who I later found out was actually in his own line, so it kind of morphed into this thing, which is fine, but I was wondering why Captain Britain was titling the book when this Wisdom fellow seems so much more important in it. But wow, there's a lot jammed into this issue, considering how much combat takes place in it especially. But there is some good banter, and while I was off kilter, I didn't exactly feel lost in all of this. But it does feel rather ancillary to the events. Rather than being part of the overall Secret Invasion, it's more like Secret Invasion bonus track. But, that might change. I do know that the fact that it is a tie-in helped to boost the book's image, so, good for them. Our next issue is to answer the question about what's up with the Baxter Building. And that's handled in Secret Invasion Fantastic Four. a spin-off series of 3 issues tying into this event. I've peeked ahead and holy crap, this is the first of what has to be 1 or 2 dozen tie-in miniseries or one-shots over and above the Secret Invasion event itself. We are milking this sucker for all it's worth. And there's not a whole lot to tell you about this first issue either. Nothing that you couldn't have already guessed. Sue gets replaced just beforehand by a Skrull, who then sent them into the negative zone. Thing has to protect the kids. Torch goes confront fake Sue, as she reveals that she's really Elijah, the Skrull that has a long and sordid history with Torch. So that is admittedly a good cliffhanger. But otherwise, this is nothing that would have been out of place in the main Fantastic Four book that month, as the focus is on them dealing with the fallout of the primary storyline's event, hardly demanding its own separate title. It's not bad, but wasn't really enthralling either. It leaves me wary of the forest of such titles that we're going to be running into over the course of this series. Are they all going to be like this? Some tepid one-shot? I hope not. This brings us to another issue of Mighty Avengers, issue 14, though this time the Fury plotline has been pushed aside. Now remember I mentioned Sentry in issue 2 of the main book? Well, that comes into play now. It starts in the past with Sentry heading in to foil a bank robbery, only to spot his enemy, the Void. He's horrified, but that's interrupted by a Skrull ship trying to fly into the Baxter building, which he intercepts and brings out into space, where the ship self-destructs, and he soon learns about what the Skrulls are all about. Fast forward to the recent past, where Jarvis, whom we've learned was replaced by a Skrull, remember, uses the breakdown of Scarlet Witch to justify asking to see the files on the Avengers in order to help serve them better and spot any further potential problems before they happen. With that, he's able to learn all about Sentry, important since he's considered by many to be the most powerful hero on Earth. So Jarvis explains that the guy is a few bricks shy of having any bricks at all. The Void is his own self-made enemy, a projection of himself that does evil even as the Sentry tries to do good. That, Jarvis Skrull thinks, is what they should use, because Sentry is like Silver Age Superman. God only knows what powers the guy has, and there's a chance that he might have an ability to detect them that they don't know about, because nobody knows all of the powers that he has. So they're going to go for option A, see if the nutso self-destructs. Failing that, there's option B. When you see him, transform into the Void and tell Sentry that he is, in fact, responsible for all of this, and if he just went and threw himself into the sun, the problem would go away. Even if he doesn't off himself, he'll either mentally shut down or probably kill everyone in a mad panic, but it'll sure as hell be fun to watch. Well, when the moment arises, as seen back in Secret Invasion 2, it works. Sentry not only leaves the fight, he leaves the planet, heads out to Saturn and just hangs there in space. His reputation as the most powerful hero no doubt hurt if anyone saw him curled up in the fetal position. Back on Earth, the Super Skrulls have burst in on the Sentry's wife, who is naturally terrified that an alien supervillain has flown through her wall, but a figure emerges to protect her. But to her horror, it's the Void, who promises to take care of her now that her husband can't. That's reassuring. I've never really been a fan of adding the Sentry to the Marvel Universe. I felt that even with the fact that his mental issues limit him, he warps things too much by his presence. Having a character so incredibly powerful and so woven into the fabric of the Marvel Universe was nice for a standalone story, sure, but going mainstream with it was going too far. That being said, this issue has worked quite effectively. I think that aside of Ben Grimm's making some cracks about the Sentry's mental state, which really just seemed out of character for him and seemed to incorporate future knowledge in it, but I don't know, it just seemed wrong. I mean, hell, I can joke about the Sentry's mental state. I'm not on a lunchbox. But this really laid out everything you needed to know about the Sentry to see the horror inherent in his darkest side stepping up and claiming to be a hero. After Captain Britain with its confusion and big-ass battles, and the FF miniseries that was quite by the numbers, this was a nice breath of fresh air with a heavy emphasis on character that has made me, for the moment at least, set aside my objections to Sentry's presence and see where this goes. This brings us to The Incredible Hercules number 117. If you thought, isn't the Hulk incredible? Well, yeah, this is where things get weird. The Incredible Hulk began in 1962. It ran for 6 issues, and then it got canceled. But the Hulk started showing up in Tales to Astonish, and showed up so often that finally they changed the name of the book to The Incredible Hulk with issue number 102. This ran all the way until issue number 474, when the book was canceled and a new John Byrne series just called Hulk came out, with no Incredible on the cover, because, truth in advertising, there was nothing incredible inside the book either. Finally, they put Incredible back on the cover, and the series continued until World War Hulk, which had finished, and then Banner was pretty much out of the game at that point. So, in comes Hercules to fill the main role. Shockingly, this was not horrible. It was, however, confusing, and to be honest, the starts and stops and changes with the Hulk series are such that I don't even know how to untangle the Gordian knot. All I know for sure is that any book called Totally Awesome Hulk is facing an uphill battle by being saddled with a title that's fucking stupid. There's not a whole lot to say about this issue, as once again, it's all about the setup. Thor and his sidekick Amadeus Cho are in a bit of trouble, so they went to seek protection from Athena, who being the daughter of Zeus makes her his half-sister. Well, she takes them in and now has drafted Hercules for a mission to strike at the Skrulls, even as they strike at Earth. They're worried that the pantheon of the Skrulls is going to replace those on Earth if the Skrulls were to win, so she wants to wipe out the Skrull gods first. So a team of gods and demigods are assembled for this storyline, Sacred Invasion. This has potential. It's something very different from the others and explores entirely different dynamics here. And there's a strong emphasis in this issue about all of the baggage that is going to come with this mission. As one example, Hercules has been placed in charge of this by Athena, and he resents that fact. He's the muscle, the big guy you throw at the problem to solve it in the simplest manner possible. He can be a team player, but he isn't equipped to be the leader. He lacks the inspiration of Captain America and the charisma of Jason, and he makes note of how things went bad even when they had those abilities. For a guy who's always seemed to be defined by a big, simple personality and ego, it indicates more rumbles beneath the surface than it seems. He's smart enough to know his own limitations. And yet he's going to lead this group anyway, and I must admit, while the issue itself lost me at times with all these characters that I've never heard of, I am interested in seeing where this is going. Our final issue is New Avengers 41, and it picks up with the arrival of the dinosaur in that fight during Secret Invasion 2. This recreation establishes for us that while we saw the Skrull Spider-Man get killed in that chaos, the real one got separated from everybody else. Being the Savage Land, Spidey runs across Kazar and Shauna, two characters whose previous knowledge I can sum up with, I have heard of Kazar. What's Kazar doing in all of this? That's a question that's weighed on me about as much as, what is the Trapster doing during World War Hulk? My answer was probably a big pile of nothing. But that doesn't make me object to this issue's decision to bring them in. This mess is occurring in their backyard, after all. It means that I just don't know how much of this, has liberties being taken by Bendis in the way they're talking. From the way they go at it, you'd think there was a TV back there in the hut. And the only reason I don't say internet is because at one point in this issue, Kazar says that they need to get the internet. I don't know from Kazar, so I'll just take the issue on its word that these two are in character with their rather current event style of method of speaking stuff. They explain that months back, there was S.H.I.E.L.D. activity involving vibranium, forcing Kazar's people to work the mines for it. So the two slipped in, and Shauna accidentally killed one of their S.H.I.E.L.D. agents when she karate chopped her in the throat. Didn't see that coming. The corpse turned into a Skrull, though, so Shauna disguised herself in the uniform, which she then used to overhear them plotting, that the Skrulls have agents inside even the New Avengers that will keep them from discovering what's happening here. But Shauna is soon discovered and so decides to shoot them all with her machine gun since, that's what it's for. Their saber-toothed cat even joins in the fun, but that's just a temporary solution to this. Kazar and Shauna raise an army to deal with this, but that's when the New Avengers have shown up during the events that occurred way back in issue number 6 of New Avengers, which left them with more questions than answers as to what S.H.I.E.L.D. was doing. Now Spidey knows, thanks to Kazar, that it was a Skrull operation all along, operating within S.H.I.E.L.D. Or at least, that's what Kazar is telling him, but he doesn't know if he can trust Kazar or not. So Captain America leaps out of the woods to break this up with his surprise cameo. Well, how about that? A tie-in that's actually related to the events occurring in its own book. That's a first for this little run. By now we can see that the Avengers books are definitely just Secret Invasion bonus issues rather than the event intruding upon the ongoing issues as would normally be the case. Now this is fine, and so far they remain among the stronger outings of the tie-ins, which is good because they fleshed out the narrative and added a great deal more of the secret to the invasion, which was lacking, as I said, in the second issue. While I appreciate the qualities that I listed in the story, taking the month as a whole, the event is extremely uneven. That could be argued to be the consequence of having some books just starting their involvement in this, true, but I'm thinking it's more that however much this might have had the groundwork laid for it long ago, the event is already proving to be too large for those plans, and so there's far too much of fight Skrulls. Now, it is appreciated after Age of Ultron for there to be action involving the villain. I'm glad for that, certainly, but with a lot of it, there's a lack of novelty in it. Indeed, I had to remind myself at one point that it wasn't even Skrulls fighting Ben Grimm, but the Negative Zone denizens. I am more optimistic at this point than I was during the Age of Ultron thing, but while there are some highs that I appraise, there's still not been enough to make me want to praise the event the way that I had wanted to praise the Black Widow Age of Ultron tie-in issue. We'll have to see next month as I tackle a whopping number of tie-in issues with the third issue of Secret Invasion.